Hi, everybody. This is Healing from the Inside Out, and I am Andrea. And today I have my fabulous hosts with me, CJC Boyd and Leslie Gordon. So today we're going to talk about something that we think isn't talked about enough. So let's get started, ladies. Let's dive into elder abuse.
An emotional subject. Like it just, you think that, every one of us has a mom or a dad and our grandpa and grandma, and we like remember as kids how they just took us in and we, just felt so safe. And it's so sad to me that there's so many of the families who are now in the kids are grown and they're supposed to be the ones taking care of the elders and they're just like dropping the ball or not doing it, or even worse, like putting them in a home or somewhere and they're not getting the care that they require. And it's just a very sad state of affairs for people who have lived an entire life, and it's, now that they're in stage of their life and people are just taking advantage of them. And it's just, I was researching and I was just like bawling because I was like, I can't believe there are people that actually think that this is okay.
Well,
Yeah.
what's really sad is the World Health Organization says 1 in 6 people over the age of 60 is abused. And I think those numbers are really low and not actual. I
Yeah.
because I have been in health for a really long time, so I think those numbers are much higher. They also reported that 2 out of 3 care workers reported abusing someone within the past year.
Wow.
So I don't know if they were talking about in a facility, because that's grounds for a dismissal and license removal. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
um so I don't know what that means. I've always worked with really amazing people. So the nurse always delegates to the other staff, but it's your responsibility to make sure that work is being done. But I've never had a problem with my staff. I always had the most amazing people, and their job is not easy. But what I found um in this that was a little offsetting, a lot of people don't have the education to give care. So it's very different. Like, we have to know it, it's my job, but there is that human part of us that should kind of know what care is, right? So there, there's different kinds of abuse. There's psychological, there's sexual, and that happens too. But the highest rate of abuse among the elderly is neglect, where people are withholding basic needs like food, shelter, water, um, access to healthcare when they need it. So people are prematurely dying because, of course, their disease processes advance when they're not eating right and drinking right and getting that rest or have shelter. So, what did you find, Leslie, that upset you the most about this?
So I kind of looked at it from a different perspective than both of you ladies did. Yes, I know there's a lot of elder abuse out there, the isolation piece. I think I was looking at it more from a personal standpoint, just because my mom is 87 and she had been talking about a few years ago about how she thought maybe she should be in a facility where there's like access to healthcare as well as, well, staff on duty. So after my brother had passed last September, she was more keen to the idea. So I started looking into the idea of her moving into, I was working with a house, I forget exactly what the terminology was, but whatever her role was. But she was basically someone who was there temporarily to help my mom with specific needs to get them set up. And one of the things she did was she found a place where my mom could go where, for her income would allow for her to be able to live. My mom wasn't so keen on a couple of things. One was that they would take most of her income and leave her with
Mhm.
just a little bit. But I told her, I mean, when I started, when I talked, because I talked to the people that had the facility, I talked to the care worker, and she was saying it was a really nice place. They get all of these things. But I think what I started realizing was it really wasn't, as I started really reading between the lines, it really wasn't that they were taking all her money. it was going into a place that was smaller, that was foreign, that she didn't have any control over her environment. That I think was the scariest for her, and that's why she pushed back so hard. She was open to the idea, but then as soon as the idea was presented, she pushed back on it. So I started thinking about this when this topic came up because I was thinking maybe it's that idea of when she was saying I'd be in my room by myself, and I said, but yes, you can get up and go out. They have activities, but I think for her that isolation, that fear of being isolated and without anyone, because right now that is one of her concerns is her kids live so far away. She now has only two remaining children, and everyone lives far away from her. My brother is like an hour and a half from her, but I'm like 3 hours by plane away. And so I think that's what's really, I think, scared her is being alone. It's the loneliness. And I think that is why I was looking at it from a different perspective, more from the personal level of just what I've experienced because of knowing that she could have possibly ended up in a facility, but she wasn't willing to go because I think that whole isolation, the loneliness she felt would gotten bigger. So that's kind of like how I approached it. I wasn't necessarily looking so much for the details of the abuses, which I know are out there. Obviously, we do. We know they're out there. You've heard the stories, but I wanted to look at it from like what is missing for them? What is making them feel like they're isolated? Why are they such a vulnerable population? So that's where I kind of approached it.
I can happily answer that for you, because we experience this a lot in my field. We see that as people get older, we all have the same insecurities as we do when we're younger. So they start to decline in disease processes and things like that, and they're not walking so good. Maybe they broke their hip and they're afraid to be seen, and then when they go to these places like the Y that have activities and they see that everybody else is not doing any better than them, then they say, oh, okay. But they somehow see themselves as inferior because they are not their former self. So people do have trouble with aging because they're used to being that vibrant person that brought home a viable wage, and now they're living on a fixed income and they don't have family around and they don't get to go out as much. So isolation is a big part of the aging population, but that also puts them at higher risk for abuse, as does dementia, because if nobody sees them regularly, who's going to notice that they're missing, right?
Mhm.
So that is a part of that piece. And a big part of the abuse is that the people that are caring for them have so much stress in their own lives and they don't know how to care for them. Or maybe the person that they're now caring for, they had a very strained relationship with prior, when they were growing up. Let's say you're taking care of your mom and you never got along with your mom, and guess what? Here she is and she needs your help. So um that weighs on a lot of people too. But there is the option to say no and to find another solution rather than abuse them. So they do neglect them, they do abuse them. There are people out there that take their money, their family. So being abused by a family member is very common. They do take their money and provide them little. I've been in health for as long as I can remember, but even before I went into nursing, I was an engineer actually a long time ago. That was my first choice, but I did home care. I liked I liked going into the home and helping people. And my husband didn't understand, you have a great job. Why do you do this on the weekends? I was like, because I like it. And I remember going to take care of this little old woman, and her nephew or somebody had this really, really, really big house. The attic was like 4 stories up. And here was this woman that I was sent to care for. Nobody told me that she had dementia. So I got there and she was so grateful I came to pray with her. I had to work my way around that. But I noticed that she was going to like a daycare, so they didn't have to deal with her during the day. And in a way, that was a good thing because she got out and it kept her mind sharp. She was involved in activities, but she had a hip problem, and you had to walk up these really large stairs just to get to the house, and then 3 flights up to where her room was in the attic. There was never any food there. They would drop off like a bowl of rice and beans at dinner, and I started shopping for her. And then I went to the nephew and said, I did some shopping because she needs to have food, and here's the receipt, and let him know you're not doing your job. Sorry, you know. So there are ways around it, and sometimes people really just don't know, or they really just don't care because he was pocketing her money and using it to pay his bills and didn't care that she was sitting alone up in the attic. Never saw them. I was there quite a lot. I started dropping in more often, even though I wasn't getting paid to check in on her. And she wound up going to stay with her sister because her sister did care and it wasn't about money for her. So you will find different highs and lows in it, but it does exist. And the best way that we can really change what's going on out there is to talk about it. So there needs to be some kind of respite care. That's why they have agencies that come in. What I do is kind of like respite care. On the weekends, I go like to different people in the community that have sick children so they can be with their other family members or have a break from dealing with a child that's sick 24/7. And I provide that care so they do get that break. So they're not stressed out because it is overwhelming providing care for someone 24/7, especially someone that's sick and that has a lot of needs, is very difficult. You know, I remember working all day. And when my mother was in the hospital, she would wait all day till I left work. I worked out in Queens, and then I would drive all the way up to Valhalla to see her. And she would tell the nurses, you don't have to change my bed or give me a shower. My daughter's a nurse. She'll do when she gets here.
Whew.
And I would get there and say, Ma, gee, that's just what I want to do at 9 o'clock at night. Make your bed. That's what the staff is here for, you know? So, and that was a little overwhelming, but I did make that choice because I would leave and go to my job when my mother wasn't sick and she did need a little more care. And they would send people in. I remember getting there one day and seeing the person they sent in for her short of breath. And I said, oh my God, you're here to help my mother? Oh my God. And that's kind of why I started that business after my mom died. And it was all I did was kind of reposition people in life. Like if someone needed to see a dietitian, I sent them to services that were free. So there were no excuses why they weren't getting them. Free home care services and things that they could get. So they had that respite because there was definitely a need,
Mhm.
you
And there
know?
still is. I think there's a huge need, though. One of the things why I brought this up is I feel there's a huge need for connection, to feel like they belong. Like you were saying, there's that whole feeling of being feeling isolated, that there is the fear, I think, of really, like my mom. I think she was really afraid to go to a place she had no control over, that was smaller, that she was foreign to her. At least in her little apartment that she's in now, it's hers. She has a little bit more space, and she doesn't have to worry that if she walks out of, she doesn't have to be around people that she doesn't know. I think that's the fear, not having family and being forced that the only communication you have or community that you have are people that you don't know. And I think that's where families, if you're going to do that, there has to be still some interaction of going and spending time. Like you were saying, the woman that you cared for, they were in the home. They could have spent more time with her, even though you were coming, that was that was almost like they were saying, oh, well, the nurse will be here, to care for her. So she'll get that connection. But that's not enough.
I
That
wasn't
will
a
lead
nurse
to,
back. I wasn't a nurse
well,
back
no,
then. I was a
or
volunteer.
however, okay, so for like what you were doing though, you were doing some home care. And so to be in that space and providing that service to someone that you didn't know, and they clearly were connected to her, but it was like, oh, the only thing that you're good for is your check. And we know someone you, so it's like you're not important. And I think that's what happens, is that they become the forgotten. And I think that's why there's a lot of loneliness and isolation in these homes, these nursing homes, these facilities, where then it's leading to that abuse because they are vulnerable. So any
I
kind of
don't
attention they would get, I would think could be considered like, oh, well, you're going to get attention. It's not the right kind of attention, but you know what I'm saying? Like, does that make sense?
I do. I think there's a certain fear from people to report because they in situations, but there's not a lot of abuse in nursing homes, contrary to what people believe. There are a lot of activities and they're very well run, unless, I mean,
Okay.
you just find the shit of the shit. But I
Hmm.
mean, I've never had that experience. There's an ombudsman who speaks on behalf of all the residents, and his number is posted on every floor near the elevator. It's required by law, and you can
Hmm.
call him anonymously and report anything. They also have access to the state numbers, so if someone's not treating them well, they can get on the call and drop a dime to the Department of Health, and the Department of Health will come in and investigate that, and it's the facility's responsibility to prove that that patient is not telling the truth. It's not on the patient, it's on the facility. And they will go around and ask other people on the floor, if something's happening. So, and in facilities, not missing a medication pass is a big deal. So they're not having their medications withheld and stuff like that. But there
But
are
can I,
also,
yeah, but can I ask you a quick question? So just the World Health Organization, like when you, of course, I don't know how much, obviously I have to do more research, but one of the things they reported on is that in a 2020 study, that 66% of nursing home staff members admitted to abusing residents. So I guess it really, like you were saying, there is that percentage that's happening
But
to,
did they say what that form of abuse was? Because for me, not giving their medication, like if they're on pain meds and they need it every 2 hours and you're not in there, you don't give it to them. That to
that's
me is
that's
neglect and
abuse. That's
abuse.
abuse. That's
Or if
neglect.
you're not going in and changing their, making sure they get to the bathroom every couple hours, or not changing them pretty quickly after they've like soiled themselves.
So
My
no,
daughter she's worked in a couple really horrible facilities, and she's like,
yeah,
Mom, I'm in these rooms and there's like no soap, no shampoo, no nothing. And she will literally go to the store and buy it herself because it's like these
yeah.
people need to be treated with respect and dignity.
but
They're
then
human
she
beings.
needs to make that
And,
anonymous
and
call
she
to the
has,
state, because
she has.
it starts there, right? So if you work in those kind of facilities, it doesn't happen. I've always had, anywhere I worked, everything I needed. And as far as changing every 2 to 4, the rule by law is every 2 to 4 hours, because I was responsible for 40 patients every day. In the hospital, I had 12. We were supposed to have 6 or 8. It's the numbers have gotten better, but every day on that unit, when I showed up and I ran that unit, I had 40 patients and I medicated them. I did have a medication nurse because I was the head nurse. So you do delegate, but I was responsible for all their care plans and everything. And there's no such thing as every 2 to 4 hours, and PRN, which is as needed. If someone soils themselves, you do it now. And there's some concept with a lot of nurses that they're not part of that staff that needs to toilet them. I think that's why I had such a great relationship with my staff, because if my staff was busy and someone needs to go to the bathroom, I just put them in. I had an aide tell me one time, that's not your job. And I said, really, whose job is it? Isn't it everybody's job?
They gotta
Isn't it
go, they gotta
everybody's
go.
job?
Whoever's there should help.
You know? So it depends on what you're doing. So I don't know what kind of neglect there is, but nursing homes are generally run really well because there's always a director, there's also a medical director. So there's a lot of people in that chain of commands. There's the PT and OT staff, the dietitians. So there's always people watching to see what happens. So if neglect or abuse is going on, then that means that all of those people are okay with it, and shame on them, you know, because there's a social worker that comes in, you know, to talk to the patients. They can call the social worker. There's always a social worker on staff in the nursing home. There's a dietitian, PT, OT, usually a physiatrist because he does the whole body. There's always an on-call doctor depending on how many floors are in the building. Sometimes there's three because they all do different floors and they have different patients. There's assistant director of nursing, there's a director of nursing, there's supervisors, and there's the head nurse. So there's no reason for that to be happening. So there are a lot of activities planned. So they do have an activities director. She's someone else that comes up, takes them to activities. Sometimes they're on the unit, so a lot of times that will happen in the television room. They'll come in and they'll do activities. Sometimes it's a dance-a-thon, but I mean some pretty cool stuff. You know, if it's a facility where that has a high age population, because some of these nursing home facilities are mixed. You have in one facility I was in, there was a 24-year-old man, you know, who got shot and he was, you know, wheelchair bound. And then we got another one. So sometimes they're young and they're old population. Depending on the population and the mix determines whether they have outside activities, you know, and what the rules are. But the parent people can come and pick them up and take them out. And that's what you don't see a lot of. So I want to say the Hispanic population is probably the best at taking care of themselves. In all of my years as a nurse, they never forget their own and they're always there at the bedside all the time. So they come in, and you don't see them drop. And I mean, they're there all the time. They're bringing meals. You know, don't worry, I got her. Let me. You know, they're very involved in their parents' care. They're always there. They're always asking questions, and usually way too many questions. But but they love their family. They're very close knit. And then the second highest that's always there with is the African American population. They're always there with their family, always. So they take care of their own, and nobody can say they don't. Um, so it does vary by culture, but there are a lot of people in every culture that drop them off. Just have them think they're staying there for a week or so, and they disappear, and they never come back.
Yeah.
And those people are devastated, but they do become like family. I worked on one unit with geriatrics. I used to specialize in geriatrics for 14 years, and those people were family. They were all together. Some of them had been together 20 years, you know? And what was abusive was they decided to separate them all and make it all acute care. Well, you know, the money's in acute care, so we're moving you all over the building, and this is going to be the new rehab floor. Andra, fix the situation, will ya? So you see things like that too, you know? So it depends on who runs the facility, but there's isolation. There's always going to be I had two patients that couldn't be more different, and they were roommates. And then they fought like cats and dogs, these two men. And if anything happened to one, the other one was always outside. Go look at him, go check him out. Hurry up, you know. And then they were fast friends, you know. So they would argue like cats and dogs, but they always had each other's back. They became like brothers, you know, and they do become like family. you'll bring someone into the TV room and they're like, "Hey, Sophie, how are you today? Oh, I love that dress you're wearing." And this is their friends. So I remember when my mother was in the hospital and she had to go to rehab. She had a fall. She did not want to go to rehab. I'm gonna hate it. I don't want anybody to tell me what I'm doing. And I went in the next day, of course. I had her in a place right next to my house so I could go there after work. And I went in and she was the belle of the ball and she didn't want to leave. She was talking with everybody, having a grand old time. And she was interacting more there than I had seen her interact with people because my mother was always on the go. She was very active. And then all of a sudden she wasn't. And nothing really changed other than one day she was and one day she wasn't. Hey, mom, I'm sure I'm going away this weekend. No, I don't think that's for me anymore. So it does happen, but there is a lot of neglect going on, and isolation is a big part of the geriatric population, and a lot of that is because they're declining and they're embarrassed by their decline. So worried about what people are going to think. They think that they no longer have anything to offer to society. Is that their fault for thinking that? No, that's the way society treats them. You have graying hair, then you go for a high executive job. A lot of people might not hire you if they can
Yeah,
pay that 18-year-old less. They don't care about your experience. They do care about that gray hair, though. So we're taught that at a certain age, okay, it's time to retire, buddy, right?
yeah,
So society tells them that they're no longer purposeful, and that's our fault. That's not
yeah,
theirs. That's something that's coded into society, and shame on us
yeah.
because
And I
they're
also, yeah, I also wanted to say too about, we talked about facilities and nursing, nursing care facilities or, nursing homes. Uh, and I just wanted to bring it back to the point, like what you were making about that family. It's still also family too, does that too. It's almost like we write them off too. Because for the longest time, up until my youngest brother passed, my one brother who's still survived, he and his family never really saw my mom. I lived all over the place, so I was never really in Canada often and they never really spent a lot of time with her. And so that was really hard. But since my brother passed, they've made much more of an effort to go and see her and spend time with her, which has been really good. But I still think too that we can do better. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have your elderly parents move in with you, but I just think just having it's that connection piece, feeling disconnected because, like you said, life slows you down. You can't move the way you used to. You might have more aches and pains, or you're tired, you don't feel like doing stuff. And so I think
they're
it's
afraid of
important
dying.
too.
They're afraid of dying
They're
alone.
afraid of
They're
exactly. And I think it's still on us too. I think we still too, as we're the kids, need to still make them feel like they belong.
But you
Um,
also have to give them choices. Like
mhm,
a big thing that spiked for me when you said your mom was worried about them taking her money and, being in a smaller place, but it's about taking their freedom from them because
mhm,
now all of a sudden they do not have the voice and the choices that they used to have. But in these type of facilities, they're supposed to offer them that choice, even if it's just a toy, because they do lose a lot of what they normally do. They can't just get up and walk to the store anymore. But they can ask the activities director, will you take me to the store? There are people that are designated that will do that. They'll take active people that can walk to the store. So, but you have to allow them choices in things they can control. So maybe they don't like what's on the meal for dinner. That's why someone goes around and says, these are your choices. Do you want the steak or do you want spaghetti tonight? When they're getting dressed, do you want to wear this pink dress do you prefer the blue? Or is there something else you like altogether? You do have to allow them that choice because it is still their life. And no one has the right to tell them, oh, you got to wear this every day. How would you feel if I told you what to wear every day, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times people go in and they just grab something out of the closet. If they can't see, then ask them, do you want the pink or do you want the blue, chiffon, whatever. But give them those choices so they feel like they're valued because that's what it comes down to. People want to feel valued. They want to feel important. And it's very hard. You have to think of these people as very strong, vibrant people, and then they're not.
Right.
And these people that raised you and made you who you are now require your help. That's very humbling for them.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to react or deal with it. And then for you to say, well, you're not good at anything, how would that, you know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
and people do say things in anger that maybe they should take a walk, step back, or call, get someone to come in and sit with them for an hour. I just need a break. I got to walk, I got to do something, or if you have other people in the family to come in and spend some time so you can have that time. So I know someone who has 9 brothers and sisters, and she's taking care of her demented mom, and they didn't get along growing up, and it's very difficult for her because the mother is demented, and people don't change as they get older. If you're a crab ass when you're young, you're a crab ass when you're old. So you don't all of a sudden become that sweet little old woman, right? So this woman apparently wasn't very nice growing up. And I said, well, then you need to find something that's going to work for you. So she asked me what I thought. I said, I don't think you should be doing this. I said, just based on what you were telling me and how you feel in the short time that you're dealing with it, it's not a good fit. And so that you can continue to visit and then maybe you should see who else can help, but nobody else in the family wants her, so I don't know who's calling me. Like, it's so important. Nobody calls me all day. As soon as I'm busy, someone calls me. They text me all day. As soon as you're doing something, everybody wants to talk to you. So so that's kind of it. You have to know. We tell people to set boundaries and to say no. That's a prime example of saying no. It's better not to take them and then be a little upset and have a better quality life than take them and diminish it.
Mhm.
So if you can handle it, or if you're not going to go for training, because it is training, there is, especially if they're sick, you have to know how to care for them. And they have all these things now where they're paying family members to take care of their sick loved ones because they don't have the caregivers as much anymore. There's no more nursing teachers, from what I understand. So the nursing shortage is only going to get worse. Just when I was going to retire. No. So, but there are places out there that train them or get help, people come in and sit with the elderly people all the time. There's companions. People sign up as companions all the time. They're in all these different centers and in supermarkets. You find those little cards. You just want to vet them and make sure that they're, decent people, and have them come in for the day and sit with your parents or whoever it is that's getting on your last nerve, no matter how much you love them. And go out and do your thing because, they do deserve to be treated like human beings. And getting old should not be a death sentence. It shouldn't put you at higher risk for abuse. I'm sorry, it shouldn't. I don't think there's any excuse for that, for the stuff that I was seeing. And you were talking about the health organization, and they were saying that all the 60%, well, in a survey that was more recent, it was this year, that was the one that said 2 out of 3 reported some kind of abuse. But they didn't say if it was staff or family. They just said
Yeah.
they did say staff, um but the staff is considered the family too, in the context of what it was saying, because they were saying that some of these people are paid to care for their family and then they withhold their funds. I was looking into the neglect and stuff, because neglect is the most common. But sexual abuse happens to them too. People
Yeah.
people think they can't talk, or um they put fear in them just like they do in children. Because you have
Hmm.
to remember, you go out of this world the same way you come into it, humble, wearing a diaper. And I'm sorry to say, but it is no truer fact. So, unless you're really taking care of yourself and taking on your next health advice, then you're gonna be, and you're gonna be in that diaper saying, "Oh, no, I should have listened to you way back when." But that's what it comes down to. So
Yeah.
it's very humbling to go from, you know,
Yeah.
so we have to depend on any
It's
words
bringing
that are
up it's bringing up a lot of like in my mom's end of life care. Like I have 3 brothers. My mom raised all of us. My mom raised all my brother's children. Like she was hands-on. And in the end, I was the one who ended up taking care of her, and she came to live with us for like a year and a half before it got to the point where I could not care for her and give her what she needed. She had to go to a facility. And I think, she had really good caregivers in the facility, but it comes down to the thing where, like you said, these people have given their lives to raise children and raise families and do all the things. And I think it's up to us to have, give back and give them a voice and be able to give them the dignity to make the choices for as long as they can. It just brings up a lot
does,
of stuff.
because
Yeah.
but for the grace of God, go I. We're not exempt from that future. So what I'm a big believer in karma. What you put out there comes back to you. I mean, there's so many nursing homes in like a 2 mile radius to most people. And it would take nothing to go in there and spend an hour to read to an elderly person who is alone, you know? Um, that's what I did in the hospitals when I was a candy striper. I bought magazines, I read to people when I was 15 and I was volunteering in the hospital, and I was reading to people, fluffing their pillows, doing that stuff. So it only takes a few minutes, and what you're doing for that person is beyond words,
Yeah.
beyond
You
words.
know, I agree. I know when I was in high school, I was in theater arts, and I had worked at a nursing home when I was 15 for a few months. And the same nursing home I went back to, and I'd made arrangements with my school to bring the seniors to the school to watch the play. And it was kind of neat. I just felt really good about doing that. I was still, I was still, I mean, I was 18, almost 18, 17 at the time. But I really feel like that could be a way for us to start educating our youth to do things like that, to the candy striper is the model. Is so like how can we as young people, um even if they're not our relatives, be kinder to those people who are the older generation. So, but that was just something I wanted to share because yeah, it was like a fun moment, bringing them to the school, putting on the play for them. And yeah, I don't even remember. I remember getting them. I don't remember taking them back. But It
She
was
lost the patient.
I watched them, but no,
Pick
it
up
was
on
really
aisle
great. And
3.
yeah, I just thought, when I look back, I think that's so cool. Something, I can look back with gratitude. But
But they have a
yeah,
lot of these, they have a lot of these like big brother, big sister programs. They should
mhm,
have some for the elderly population
yeah.
because they both have the same need. So
Mhm,
I think that we as people institute, we have a good idea. We institute great things, but they're needed everywhere. So we're just covering a small piece. We're doing big brothers, big sisters because these people don't have family, right? A lot of geriatric people. There's a lot of people that have outlived their family,
mhm,
and
In
it's
my
just
kids'
them.
in my kids' school, they would go to the local community center and they would sign up for the kids to have one of the people from the community center. There were the older people coming like for the Meals on Wheels, and they would have them come in once a month to do a activity at the school. So that they kind of did that big brother, big sister thing, but it was with like a grandparent. If they didn't, even if they had grandparents, they wouldn't choose that. They would choose somebody from the community center so they could bring those people into the school and they would have activities. And that was one way of keeping, having the young children see what the older generation is like and imparting the wisdom and some of the things. And I think those connections, my kids made some of the most amazing connections with old people that were not related to them because they had that program at school.
I
that's
think
cool.
that's amazing.
Yeah, I like that.
So, any final words, ladies?
I think for me, it would be just like if I could say anything to anyone who's watching this is just to really take a close look at their life. Like, all of the things that they have, their parents helped to raise them, and however those parents are, whether they were step parents, whether they were foster parents, whatever that looked like, got them to where they are. It's just having a mindset that we are all going to end up old one day. Most of us are going to get there. Some of us might not. So, how would you like to be treated in your final stages of life? Would you like to have a quality of life where people care about you, check in on you, have conversations with you, make you feel like you belong, that you're valued? Or would you like to be one of the many who feel isolated and lonely and afraid? So if you want to have that quality of life like you have now, at the same or the idea of quality of life in your older years, then start modeling that behavior towards the people who are already there. That would be mine.
CJ?
I think for me, it's like as a young child, I was instilled in that. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and my grandparents' friends when I was a kid. And to this day, if I see an older person like with their grocery cart, I'll be like, can I put your groceries in your trunk for you? Can I take your cart back for you? I think it, like Leslie said, it's like instilling in our children or our grandchildren, these are people that deserve your respect and dignity and all the things. And it's just modeling behavior that's good behavior because there's enough bad behavior out there. And then just be really cognizant of what's going on around. I mean, if you see somebody who that you think is not getting the care that they deserve, be the voice for that person if they're not able to be that voice for themselves.
Yeah.
Great topics, ladies. Great topics that we keep finding. So I'm Jeanette, and these are my final thoughts. I think all life has value. I don't think that's dependent on age, and I don't think that that has anything to do with the way people should treat you. So I think that you need to know that you have value. And if anybody's treating you like you're less than, if you're being neglected or abused, there are numbers you can call. And if you don't know what those numbers are, you can reach out to me at Anjanette. I am literally everywhere. Just to Google that name and you will find it. And I will come and help you if I gotta walk that. So you do have value. You're a human being and every God created us all equal. Nobody's better, nobody's worse, and your age has nothing to do with it. You are a valued member of society. Have a great night, and thanks for tuning in.